The night was thick with silence when the flames rose high, casting eerie shadows across the faces of the crowd. In the center of the square, a young man named Alonso López stood bound to a stake, his eyes wide with fear and defiance. At the age of 19, he was about to become a victim of the Inquisition, a system that had haunted Spain for centuries. The year was 1675, and the auto de fe, the public execution, was about to begin. Alonso wasn't alone. Around him, the effigies of 6 Portuguese Jews were set to be burned, symbolizing the Inquisition's reach across the Mediterranean. The crowd, a mix of the curious and the devout, watched in a mix of horror and fascination. The air was thick with the scent of burning wood and the sound of crackling flames. Alonso's case sent a ripple of fear through the converso community, the descendants of Jews who had converted to Christianity under pressure. The persecution of the conversos, known as the Chuetas in Mallorca, had been relatively quiet for over a century. But the arrest of Alonso and the burning of the effigies marked the beginning of a new wave of terror. In 1677, the Inquisition launched a broad crackdown, and by 1678, they had arrested 237 people accused of practicing Judaism in secret. The trials that followed were brutal, and the punishments were severe. In 1679, 5 autos de fe were held in Mallorca, with 221 people publicly reconciled to the church. The confiscations from their properties reached a staggering 2.5 million ducats, a fortune that left many families ruined. The conversos, crushed by these events, remained silent and afraid. But in 1688, a group of them, led by Anafer Cortes and Rafael Valls, attempted a daring plot to regain their rights. The plan failed, and the repercussions were swift. In 1691, 4 more autos de fe were held, and 86 people were either burned alive or in effigy. The community was shattered, and any hope of improvement was crushed under the weight of the Inquisition's relentless pursuit. The 17th century was a dark time for the conversos, but the 18th century brought new challenges. When Philip V became king in 1701, there was a glimmer of hope. He refused to attend an auto de fe held in his honor, a small but significant sign of change. However, the Inquisition remained a powerful force, and in 1721, the king attended another auto, signaling that the old ways were not yet gone. The 1720s saw a new wave of persecution, with over 60 autos de fe held, and nearly 800 people accused of practicing Judaism in secret. Despite the decline in the number of autos and accused by the mid-18th century, the legacy of the Inquisition remained. The last known case of Judaizing in Spain occurred in 1756, and by the time the Inquisition was officially suppressed in 1834, the practice of Judaism had been all but eradicated from the country. Yet, the shadow of the Inquisition lingered. In 1704, when the British captured Gibraltar, they allowed Jews to settle there, creating a thriving community that thrived into the 19th century. But in Spain, anti-Semitic prejudices persisted, and the struggle against discrimination continued. Even as late as the 19th century, Jews were seen as a threat, and the Inquisition's legacy of fear and suspicion lived on. The Inquisition was more than just a historical event. It was a haunting presence that shaped the lives of generations. The story of Alonso López and the countless others who suffered is a reminder of the power of fear and the enduring impact of persecution. As the flames of 1675 faded into memory, the legacy of the Inquisition continued to cast its long, dark shadow over Spain. In the late 15th and early 16th centuries, Spain's influence in Europe was extensive, but it also brought significant resistance, especially from Italy. Spanish troops had been in Italy since 1494 to stop French expansion, and this presence was not welcome. King Ferdinand of Spain, who was also the King of Sicily, took over Naples, and under Charles V, the Spanish also controlled Milan. This made many Italian states, including the papacy, see the Spanish as oppressors. The Italian people had a strong dislike for the Spanish, and this feeling was reflected in their views of the Spanish Inquisition. There were several uprisings in Sicily and Naples against the Inquisition, partly because people hated the Inquisition's familiars' assistance. Even King Ferdinand's attempt to introduce the Spanish Inquisition to Naples failed due to strong protests. Spanish rule and the Inquisition were seen as tyrannical. Italian diplomats who visited Spain often described it as a poor and backward country. They reported that the Spanish were very religious on the surface, but not in reality, and that people lived in fear of the Inquisition. The Venetian ambassador, for example, said that everyone was terrified of the Inquisition's procedures. These negative views of Spain and the Inquisition spread to other parts of Europe. The Dutch and English, who had active printing presses, used this as a tool to fight against Spanish influence. They feared that Spain might try to establish the Inquisition in their countries. In the Netherlands, William of Orange and the Count of Egmont were so worried about this that they asked Cardinal Granvelle to deny the rumors. However, Philip II of Spain made it clear that the Spanish Inquisition was not suitable for other countries, and that he had no plans to introduce it elsewhere. Despite these reassurances, the image of the Inquisition as a tool of oppression persisted. In 1567, a book called The Secrets of the Holy Spanish Inquisition was published in Heidelberg. It was written by two Spanish Protestant exiles, Casiodoro de Rien and Antonio del Corro, and it provided a detailed description of how the Inquisition worked and its persecution of Protestants. This book was translated into multiple languages and helped spread the negative image of the Inquisition across Europe. The Dutch, who were fighting against Spanish rule, used the fear of the Inquisition as a propaganda tool. William of Orange, in his Apology of 1581, accused the Spanish of being bloodthirsty and described the Inquisition as a tool of terror. He even claimed that many Spaniards were descendants of Moors and Jews, which was a way to discredit them. In England, which had recently experienced its own religious persecution under Queen Mary, the fear of the Inquisition was also used as propaganda. John Foxe, in his Book of Martyrs, warned that the Inquisition could be introduced to any country where Catholics were in power. The English government, during the threat of the Spanish Armada in 1588, funded leaflets and other materials that portrayed the Spanish as cruel and the Inquisition as a terrible institution. This propaganda continued into the 17th and 18th centuries. During the 30 Years' War, Northern European countries also joined in the campaign against Spain. The stories about the Inquisition became more exaggerated, with fictional accounts of horrific tortures and abuses. Even scholars like John Motley, who wrote The Rise of the Dutch Republic, included vivid and often inaccurate descriptions of the Inquisition's methods. The negative image of Spain and the Inquisition was sometimes referred to as the Black Legend, a term coined in 1914 by a Spanish writer named Julian Juderia. He argued that Protestant foreigners and progressive Spaniards had systematically defamed Spain. However, many of the actions attributed to Spain, especially in the context of its empire, were real and not just legend. In the 19th century, Spanish liberals also began to criticize the Inquisition. Antonio Alcala Galiano, a Spanish politician and former refugee in London, gave a lecture in 1828 where he accused the Inquisition of suppressing intellectual freedom and causing absolute mental darkness in Spain. This criticism from within Spain added to the lasting image of the Inquisition as a symbol of oppression. In the late 18th century, a storm diverted a ship from Spain bound for Cuba to the port of Philadelphia. On board was a priest from the Canary Islands named Antonio José Ruiz de Padrón. Little did he know that his brief stay in this bustling American city would change his life and his views on one of the most controversial institutions of his time, the Inquisition. Padrón, whose English was limited, found himself drawn into discussions at the homes of Benjamin Franklin and George Washington. Franklin, known for his open-mindedness and involvement in Freemasonry, sparked conversations about religion and the role of the Inquisition. Padrón, despite his fragmented English, managed to express his thoughts. He admitted that the Holy Office, as the Inquisition was known, was an iniquitous body that deserved to be abolished. Encouraged by Washington, Padrón repeated his opinion from the pulpit of a local Catholic church in Philadelphia, where he delivered a sermon in Spanish. This sermon was so impactful that it was translated into English and repeated by another priest, Father Beeston, the following Sunday. The congregation was large, and the Protestant ministers were particularly interested, as they wanted to see how a Spaniard would speak about the Inquisition. When Padrón returned to Spain, he was determined to fight for the abolition of the Inquisition. He was eventually elected as a deputy for the Canaries to the courts of Cadiz in 1812. In January 1813, he delivered an impassioned speech in the courts, calling the Inquisition unnecessary, harmful to the state, and contrary to the spirit of the gospel. His speech was crucial in winning votes for its abolition. Around the same time, a Catalan writer named Antonio Puigblanch was also making waves. Born in Mataró, Puigblanch studied in Madrid and became a professor at the University of Alcalá. He was deeply concerned about reform in the church and state. In 1811, he published The Inquisition Unmasked, a book that aimed to destroy the Inquisition from its foundations. The book was well researched, using a wide range of sources, and it had a significant impact on readers. Puigblanch's invective was strong, but his work was influential in shaping public opinion. Another key figure in the fight against the Inquisition was Juan Antonio Lorent. A priest from Aragon, Lorent worked with the Inquisition and became one of its secretaries in Madrid in 1789. In 1809, when Joseph Bonaparte, the French king of Spain, abolished the Inquisition, he asked Lorent to write a history of the tribunal. Lorent's Annals of the Inquisition of Spain and Historical Memoir on National Opinion in Spain about the Tribunal of the Inquisition were published in 1812 and served as the main source of information for the deputies in the courts of Cadiz. Lorent's work was detailed and well documented, making it a valuable resource for those who wanted to understand the Inquisition's activities. Lorent's work became a bestseller, but it also faced criticism from conservative circles. Despite this, his account dominated the field for a long time, and is still recognized as a classic today. However, some of the conclusions drawn from his work, such as the idea that the Inquisition had a significant impact on Spain's population growth, or that it executed hundreds of thousands of people, have been debunked by modern historians. The image of the Inquisition was further shaped by the famous caprichos of the painter Francisco de Goya. Goya, a court artist, included satirical references to the Inquisition in his work. His series of etchings, particularly numbers 23 and 24, were explicitly critical of the tribunal. Goya's satirical work, including his painting, Auto de Fe of the Inquisition, depicted the tribunal in a harsh and imaginative light. However, it is important to note that these works were creative expressions rather than historical testimonies. The liberal campaign against the Inquisition also influenced how the tribunal was perceived. Writers like José Amador de los Ríos, in his Historical Studies on the Jews, 1848, portrayed the Inquisition as a powerful and oppressive force that persecuted intellectuals and stifled progress. This image was reinforced by the experiences of Jewish people, who saw the Inquisition as a major threat. The works of Jewish historians, such as Yitzhak Beer, further emphasized the Inquisition's role in the persecution of Jews and its impact on Jewish history. While the Inquisition's role in the persecution of Jews is a significant part of its history, it is important to remember that the tribunal had a broader impact on Spanish society and the Christian religion. The legacy of the Inquisition, as shaped by these writers and artists, continues to influence how it is remembered and understood today. In the 1800s, the way people thought about the Inquisition in Spain was a mix of complex ideas. Non-Jewish historians like Voltaire were more interested in how the Inquisition affected human freedom and culture. One of these historians, W.H. Prescott, was fascinated by the Inquisition and wrote about it in his book about King Philip II of Spain. Prescott described the Inquisition as a constant, watchful eye that never slept, always ready to strike. This vivid image of the Inquisition later inspired Fyodor Dostoevsky, the famous Russian writer, who read Prescott's work and used it to create the powerful character of the Grand Inquisitor in his novel, The Brothers Karamazov. However, not everyone saw Spain in a negative light. Writers like Washington Irving and painters like John Sargent depicted Spain with a sense of exotic beauty. Irving wrote stories that captured the charm and mystery of Spain, and Sargent painted the stunning Alhambra, a palace in Granada, which helped people in English-speaking countries see Spain in a more positive light. In the 1870s, an American scholar named Henry Charles Lee started collecting information to write a history of the Spanish Inquisition. His 4-volume book, published in 1906, is still considered the most detailed and accurate history of the Inquisition. Lee had strong opinions, but his work was based on real documents, not just stories. He showed that the Inquisition wasn't just a made-up horror story, but a real part of Spain's history. Despite his critical views, Lee's work helped people understand the Inquisition in a more factual way. In Spain, people had very different opinions about the Inquisition. Some, like the liberal Alcalá Galliano, blamed the Inquisition for all of Spain's problems, including economic struggles. They argued that the persecution of conversos, Jews who converted to Christianity, and the expulsion of Jews led to the decline of Spain's middle class and economy. They also said that censorship by the Inquisition isolated Spain intellectually and stifled science and learning. However, not everyone agreed. Marcelino Menéndez y Pelayo, a respected Spanish intellectual, criticized those who blamed the Inquisition for everything. He mocked the idea that the Inquisition was responsible for everything bad in Spain, from the lack of industry to the habit of taking siestas. Menéndez y Pelayo also helped Henry Charles Lee by providing him with documents from Spanish archives, showing that he was willing to support serious research on the Inquisition. Despite Menéndez y Pelayo's efforts, many Spanish writers and thinkers, especially those in the clergy, continued to let their personal beliefs influence their views on the Inquisition. This made it hard to have a balanced understanding of the Inquisition's role in Spanish history. The Inquisition became a powerful symbol in Spanish politics. Both left-wing and right-wing groups used it to support their views. For example, some people said the Inquisition was the reason Spain was backward, while others defended it as a necessary part of preserving the country's Catholic identity. This made it difficult to separate fact from fiction. As more scholarly research emerged, the image of the Inquisition as a bloodthirsty and cruel institution began to fade among historians. However, this image remained strong in popular culture, thanks to writers like Eleanor Hibbert, who wrote fictional stories about the Inquisition that captured the public's imagination. The Inquisition also left a lasting impression on the memories of ordinary people. In the 1900s, researchers found that some elderly people in rural areas of Spain still had vivid, though often inaccurate, memories of the Inquisition. They believed that inquisitors would sneak into villages at night, listen at doors, and take away beautiful girls. These stories, while not true, showed how the Inquisition had become a part of folklore. Contact with other countries also changed how Spaniards viewed the Inquisition. Some people, like a pharmacist from Tenerife, noticed that life in France was more free and less restrictive. They saw that in France, people weren't constantly under suspicion and could live without fear of religious persecution. This realization made some Spaniards question the need for the Inquisition. By the late 1700s, some Spanish statesmen, like Jovellanos, began to argue that the Inquisition had outlived its purpose. They believed that the Inquisition had created deep injustices, especially against conversos, and that these wrongs needed to be corrected. Jovellanos and others saw the Inquisition as an obstacle to progress and called for its abolition. However, even these progressive thinkers were cautious. They wanted reform, but they also valued stability. They didn't want to cause chaos by completely overthrowing the old order. This meant that the Inquisition, though criticized, remained a powerful institution for a long time. The Inquisition's history is still a topic of debate. While it's important to understand the Inquisition's actions, it's equally important to look at the broader social and political context of the time. The Inquisition was just one part of a complex society, and many of Spain's problems had causes that went far beyond the actions of the Inquisition. By looking at the bigger picture, we can better understand the role the Inquisition played in Spain's history. The story of Spain's Inquisition is a complex and often painful chapter in history. It wasn't just a Spanish problem. Similar practices existed in other parts of Europe and even spread to the New World. But Spain became a symbol of religious persecution and intolerance, partly because of the Inquisition's long and intense presence there. In the late 1800s, a writer named Juan Valera asked a tough question: was there something in Spain's character that made it so susceptible to the Inquisition? He believed it was a mix of pride and a mistaken belief that Spain was God's chosen nation. This led to a deep isolation from the rest of Europe, which only made things worse. Other thinkers, like Claudio Sanchez Albornoz, saw the problem as the rejection of Spain's diverse heritage, its Jewish and Arabic roots. This rejection created deep divisions that never fully healed. Ramón Menéndez Pidal thought of Spain as a land of two opposing forces, always in conflict. He hoped for a day when these two Spains could find peace and unity. The Inquisition wasn't unique to Spain, but it became a powerful tool of control. It aimed to protect and purify society, but it often did so through fear and violence. Critics like the historian Lord Acton called it an appalling edifice of intolerance, tyranny, and cruelty. Even in Europe, where freedom of thought was valued, the Inquisition's methods were sometimes adopted, especially during the Reformation. Spain's Inquisition left a lasting mark on its people and on how others saw it. John Milton, a famous English writer, used Spain as an example of tyranny when he argued for freedom of the press. Even today, the Spanish Inquisition is often seen as a symbol of oppression. But it's important to remember that no institution can be understood without looking at the society that created it. How did a place that once welcomed different religions become so intolerant? How did people, who were usually peaceful, accept the burning of their fellow citizens? How did a nation that explored the world and opened new frontiers accept such strict mental controls? These are hard questions, and there are no simple answers. The Inquisition was a product of its time, shaped by fears, beliefs, and the actions of those in power. But it also shows how easily societies can slide back into darkness, even after making progress. Today, we see similar patterns in different parts of the world. People and governments still use control and coercion, often in the name of religion, race, or security. The Inquisition teaches us that the struggle for tolerance and freedom is ongoing. It's a reminder that we must always be vigilant and question the powers that seek to limit our rights and freedoms. In the end, the story of the Inquisition is a cautionary tale. It shows us the dangers of intolerance and the importance of standing up for what is right, even when it's difficult. It's a story that continues to resonate, reminding us that the fight for a better, more inclusive world is never truly over.